Welcome to Redvee TV, supported by Chapel House for the 2023 season. And on this week's episode, we are going to discuss Saints' salary cap and where the squad lies ahead of the 2024 season at this moment in time. Kev, we have seen quite a lot of comments since the season finished online, on the various platforms, social media. Fans wanting signings, it's fair to say. Wondering why we haven't gone for certain players. I've seen at least 7 or 8 players in the first team that fans want replacing. It's fantasy land, and a little bit of it's knee jerk, but I think it's a lack of understanding of how the salary cap and how contracts work.
Yeah, I think I've called it throughout our time doing this fantasy rugby league, and it probably is just a lack of understanding or a lack of critical thinking that people do go out and just make knee-jerk posts. I'd imagine that the majority of us have put a knee-jerk post out there and whether deleted it or left it or whatever. But yeah, there's been a lot of talk of we need to sign player X, Y, and Z. We need to get rid of player X, Y, and Z. And I'm not sure that the people saying all this quite grasp how difficult everything coming into place is.
Yeah, we're going to pull up the contract situation in a moment, but essentially transfers, and I think in rugby league, essentially in the main, you're always going to get the odd one. But for Saints to want to move player X along because he's not good enough would require another club to want the player, to be able to offer a salary that is acceptable to the player, and the player to want to move as well.
Yeah.
Once the club have committed to a contract for a player for 2 years or 3 years, in the main, you generally have to ride through that process.
Yeah. And I think people just think, you can get rid of someone. If I'm, say, Kev Pender plays for Saints, they don't fancy me in whatever position I play, big fat forward, whatever. They don't fancy me, but I've got a year left on my deal. And they say, we want to move you on. I say, okay.
We're sending you to witness, Kev.
They're sending me to witness, yeah.
You're on £60,000 a year at Saints.
Yeah.
But I know you've got a year left on your deal, but we don't really fancy it anymore. And Widnes are willing to take you, but they're only going to offer you 30k.
Yeah. So my first question would be, okay, when am I going to get my contract paid up?
Sorry, you're not, Kev. We're not paying your contract. Don't we just want you to have your money and leave and go and drop down?
Well, that's not happening then.
There we go.
So who's paying me off? How much are you paying me off? I want my full contract. And I suppose this is one of the things that I don't know, just not frustrates as such, but you just think, have a little think about it. Have a little think about if it's you in a job and somebody says, we don't fancy you going, but you've got a contract, you'd be asking how much of that contract's going to be paid up. Where's that money coming from? And that in sports, and especially in rugby league, not a cash-rich sport, it's a big deal to, say, pay Kev Pender up 60 grand this year and then have to find the money to pay your new signing who you want more than Kev Pender.
It's even more difficult to add signings to your squad if you spend the salary cap, as Saints do. We know Saints spend the salary cap pretty much in full every year. So for us to sign anyone, someone has to leave, essentially. I know you might get a little bit of wiggle room now and again, just depending on dispensations for local trained players or whatever reason. But on the whole, for someone to sign for Saints, someone has to go out the door the other way.
Yeah, more often than not. As you say, you might get Kev Pender going because he's been on 60 grand. His contract comes to an end. Thanks for your service. Brilliant. We're going to bring 2 players in who are on 30 grand. You might get that, but they're going to be a step down, aren't they?
Okay, I'm just going to pull the contract situation up of the current squad. So there you go, Kev. There is the squad contracts for the next couple of years, just so people can see who's signed up and when. From this year, essentially, obviously, Dan Norman is leaving the club, and the money that was used on his contract will have been utilised, we assume, to upgrade George Delaney to a deal that will take him to 2026, because you don't get these young players coming through and expect them to stay on academy player money forever.
Yeah, true.
Matt Whitley is basically taking the contract that is being vacated by Louis.
Yep.
James Roby is being replaced by Darryl Clark.
Yep.
We obviously got Moses and Bai, who replaced Joey Lussick. And then money-wise, you've got Lewis Baxter leaving the club, and he'll be replaced by Noah Stevens, who has signed a deal.
Yep.
And then aside from that, the only players you've got leaving are academy players who were at the back end of the squad numbers and fill your squad out, but are on very little money. And Will Hopewati, who hasn't been replaced as of yet. So in terms of money available to actually bring players in, you could argue at this moment in time that there's only the money that will have been vacated by Will Hopewati leaving the club.
Yeah, it looks that way. As you say, there's quite a few who we're going to have to negotiate or renegotiate for 2024 there. But yeah, the way that you've set that out, and you've got the likes of, say, Dan Moss, who'd be replaced with George Whitby, Wesley Bruns, who will probably be an academy player, whether that's somebody like John Vaughan or someone like that. It just shows where we are with players. And I think unfortunately, sometimes you have got to go through revolution rather than just evolution. But people who are seeing the likes of Wigan make a load of signings, we're not in the situation that we can do that. Nor do you necessarily want too many signings coming in at once. I think you've got to try and do it gradually, because otherwise you bring them all in and it doesn't work. You look at Warrington when they got Darryl Powell, and they brought a load of players in. It didn't work. And they were some players that came through.
If you want to become a club who brings 5 or 6 players in every single year, it's either A, because things aren't working out.
Yep.
But then you end up in a terminal cycle like Hull FC, who give 1 and 2 year deals out and are just constantly turning over the squad, which leads to a lack of success in itself. And if you want to sign the best players, you have to put them on longer deals. Now, you can reach a point potentially where your squad does need a turnover, but it makes it harder to do.
It does. I think sometimes you do need that churn, that turnover, just to freshen things up. But as you say, you don't want to be doing that with 10 players. I know we've released 11, but they're mainly fringe players who've gone. And you're hoping that the players who come in and take their spots are going to lift you again. I think it's a well-known fact that most Saints fans want to see a bit more pace in our 3 quarters, and hopefully that's where the money that Will Hopewati's been on and that quarter place can be spent and used. But as we said at the start of this, other than that, A, who are you getting rid of? And B, how are you getting rid of them? And I think it's almost like we're not trying to be know-it-alls or patronising or anything like that. We're trying to understand as best we can how and when players will move on or retire, or what can be done in the transfer market. Because you see people saying, we need another prop, we need a centre, we need a winger. That's all very well and good. Have we got the money for it?
Yeah. it's not even the case. We could be the most cash rich club in the world, but you're still limited on how much you can actually spend.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like
And
I seen a post before, Kev, of and it was in discussion of T. Ritson's deal, and it was like, well, why didn't we go for Adam Swift, who was available earlier in the year? Well, Adam Swift's gone to Huddersfield on a 3-year deal, which we believe is on really good money.
yeah,
There might be a big difference between how much we can actually offer in terms of a contract to a winger and the money that Adam Swift is on. You've got to have that balance. You can't just chuck money when you can't spend it.
and do you want someone who is an out and out winger, or do you want someone who can fill a couple of roles, who is more of a centre that can play wing rather than just a winger, as you say? That's it. Adam Swift, 3 years, good deal. Can we afford him? Who knows? I think the main one that's going round is Harry Newman. That's one of the rumours that has been going round. I would find it very, very difficult to believe that a club like Leeds would use him in the promo for their new home shirt and then release him from the final year of his deal. I find that very, very difficult to believe. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen. I'm just saying if it does, I think that would be one of the most shock transfers that I've seen coming into Saints.
Yeah, I just don't believe it. It's like names grow legs because they've been mentioned as having a little bit of a bad time. It was on the Sky commentaries, wasn't it? But if Leeds are going to get back to the level they want to be at, they're not going to do it by releasing their best players. They're trying to improve the club. They've obviously gone and signed Andy Ackers and Brodie Croft. They're not going to take two, a step forward and a step back at the same time. Harry Newman gets frustrated, you believe, because he was playing in such a poor team. I just don't think that's going to happen. Equally, I keep hearing the name Sam Eze mentioned. As far as we're aware, that's not going to happen either. The one thing I want to talk about a little bit is in 2024, you've got Tommy Makinson, Mark Percival, Johnny Lomax, Alex Walmsley, all out of contract. I find it hard to believe at this moment in time that we won't be offering them new deals.
Yes, same. And you don't know what Lewis Dodd's 2024 to 2026 deal will be. Will we be on the hunt for a scrum half? Will he have a great year next year and he decides to carry on with us for another 2 years? Is his money going up in that last 2 years?
So there's the other thing. We see quite a clamour on social media for Lewis Dodd to be replaced. Well, potentially Lewis Dodd's deal is in his favour until 2026. And he will be on starter scrum half money.
Yeah.
At a top Super League club. So he will be on a good contract. So unless he gets offered a better deal in the NRL, it's hard to say that he won't be our scrum half until 2026, unless something dramatically changes.
Yeah, unless he decides he wants out at the end of this one and he's got another club lined up. Definitely. I think we've spoken at length about how it's tough to come back from such an injury, and hopefully he can have the handbrake taken off him a little bit more playing wise. But again, if he decides to take up that contract till 2026, he's our scrum half until then. And you've got to learn to play with your scrum half however he is playing. So if he's told just to drop off ball, big kick on the fifth, is that his fault or is it coaching? Which is it? And we could get into a massive debate about this. As you
the answer
say,
is, Kev, no one actually knows, because you see people discussing how he's being coached. Unless you're actually in the training sessions, you don't know what is going on.
Correct. We don't know. Others don't know. There's only the coaching staff, the players, the people who are around them who will know what they're being told to do.
We suspect Johnny Lomax will be named the captain for next season.
Yeah.
I can't see Johnny Lomax ever playing for another club.
It would surprise me. Again, it would really surprise me if he did. I could see him possibly signing another deal that will take him to the end of his career with us.
Yeah, he'll turn 34 at the end of next season. Is he the point where you probably offer him 12-month increments?
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Or a 1+1, same as we've done with Sione there and with Conrad, where you give him a 2-year deal, and it's a case of, well, we'll have a look at it at the end of this 12 months and say yes or no. Same as James Roby did for this season just gone, where he went, yeah, actually, yeah, we'll go round again. What contract's in front of me? Thanks very much. That'll do.
I think
it would.
The hardest part, Kev, is because these players have been such big names, legends of the club, have been integral to our success for so long. I would not like to be in a position where I say to any of those players, we no longer require your services.
Yeah.
But that's why we're on the good money.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why we're not in them jobs. It'll be a tough one, but unfortunately, sport's ruthless. And at times you do think, well, there might be a player in that starting 13 even that they look at and go, actually, we don't need your services anymore because we can get player X in and they're cheaper than you. And that's how we're going to go.
But again, we get back to the salary cap and where players stand in the pecking order. So, for example, I'll pick Alex Walmsley out. He's our premier prop.
Yeah,
he's probably our number one prop forward. In a year or two's time, he might drop into being the LMS of the squad on less money. He might be on your 4th or 5th prop money, and is happy to see his career out. The same with Tommy Makinson, rather than go elsewhere, he might go on reduced money. Mark Percival's still 29. I think all of these players remain at Saints after next season. I think they'll all be given new deals. So even at the end of next season, you're potentially only looking at a couple of players who could potentially move on.
Yeah, because you're not going to see that massive revolution. I don't think that's how we tend to work as a club. I think we tend to evolve more than anything. And you see us trying to add a bit of quality. So, as I say, I'd love to see a bit of pace in there. But you want to add quality that kind of fits the ethos of the club as well. So they're not just going out, signing a player just because he's quick, for example. So, like with the T. Ritson thing, I think it's wise us signing him up. As I said when we did the video for him, I think it's a surprise that we've gone 2 years straight off. But to sign him up for next year, probably one of the lower earners of the squad, giving yourself some squad depth and hoping that he can kick on like James Bentley did, like Joe Batchelor's done, people like that. That's what you want. But I saw somebody mention Neil McDonald as would have filled a gap for Saints. Neil McDonald didn't return to Leeds, AIEIO. He didn't. He went over, for the birth of his child, but then got released through his contract. He's now signed up at Salford. What's to say he's not going to do the same again? Is that the right type of person we want at the club? Or do you want someone who you've done a little bit more due diligence on?
Yeah. I see some of the names. Obviously, Wigan's recruitment for next year has been really good. And they've signed quite a few. But you have to look at what's going out the door as well. So obviously Luke Thompson's coming in. Have they signed Luke Thompson knowing that Morgan Smithies is going out the door the other way? People tend to look at what comes in, but isn't what is going out of a club as well. Listen, Wigan are on the up. It has to be said that the champions, they'll start next season probably rightly as favourites.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But we are not a million miles away. We were 10 minutes from a Challenge Cup final, and we were 10 minutes from our return to Old Trafford. And it'll be interesting to see how next year goes. I don't think we're as far away as some would have you believe.
Yeah, I think, as I say, the playing style needs to be a little bit more dynamic. a lot more runners, support runs, offloads, a little bit more nous in the kicking game. But yeah, this bunch of players has earned the right to go again. You just need to make sure that you are adding a little bit of quality every year.
So if we believe that the money from Will Hopewati is still available,
yep,
then here is what I've produced. Is if you've ever seen an NFL depth chart of who could play where, there we have it. So obviously this is in essentially a bit of an order of who would be selected where and when. So at fullback, for example, Jack Wellesby would be your first choice. John Bennison would second choice to play there. If you got desperate, Tommy Makinson, Moses and Bay could do it, or Ben Lane would probably be outside bet. Hooker, you'd assume that Darryl Clark will start as your favourite, given we've spent big money on him. Moses and Bay to back up. Jake Wingfield could fill in there. Morgan Knowles, who I know you would hate to play there again, Kevin.
Him and Jake Wingfield, because we lose so much from the actual pack with them two playing at hooker.
And then even though Jake Burns has been signed as our third choice hooker for the year, you would assume that if injuries bit, you would probably put one of your first team players in that spot first. We look well stacked at prop. We look well stacked at second row. The only issue we'll have with the prop maybe is we might be slightly light with a big forward if Parzy's out for a significant amount of time next season.
Yeah, and that's why I think there's been clamour for another prop to come in. But with Sione looking likely that he is going to become that mobile prop, I'm going to call him. It's whether we'll actually look at that with Jake Wingfield back as well. I can see Jake Wingfield be more utilised in the middle rather than second row. I think it's been alluded to by Paul Wellens in the past, and I think he's probably more suited for it. So it's whether we look at that or we think, well, actually, we're going to start with Walmsley, Lees, Wingfield, and Matauchi are going to be our first choice props for the first game of the year. George Delaney might go out again on dual reg, or might just be, listen, you'll get your chance in the coming weeks, mate. You're not going anywhere this year. We're not sending you on loan, dual reg, anything like that, because you are fifth, sixth choice prop, and we need you to come in, and when we're struggling again like we have done this year, we need you to come in and provide that youthful impetus. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you putting Delaney as third, because I think that's where he stands where he stood at the end of the year. But it might be a case of, well, we want to make sure we're not putting him into too many games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, we're well stacked at second row. I think when you look at the three quarters, though, as I'm sure you're going to move on to, that's where we may be a little bit light.
Yes. So that was obviously the main point we were going to make. I think we are light in the outside backs, which is probably the given that the position that has been vacated is Will Hopewati, who could cover centre and wing. I suspect if we're not looking to sign a prop, then it has to be an outside back. Because if we received any sort of injuries in the outside backs, I think we'd be short, and you'd be resorting to putting a Sione or a Matt Whitley out there, and you don't want them playing there if you can help it.
No, definitely not. Especially if you're going to if Sione's going to be more of a prop this year, you definitely don't want to be taking him out of having to do, I don't know, if he's done the big stint at prop 40 minutes and then he goes off, but then has to come on at right centre. It's not ideal, is it? And listen, Matt Whitley can play centre, but it's all very well having utility players, but you want someone who is an out-and-out back, really, to play centre or wing. And that's why I think that we'll look at someone who is primarily a centre and can play wing rather than a winger, an out-and-out winger, because Tommy Makinson is our first choice there. John Bennison's the one with the shirt at the moment, and rightly so, because he does nothing wrong over there. Yet you're going to look for a little bit of pace. So T. Ritson will probably get his chance again next year. You possibly add Keane Guildford to that list, but I don't think he just got a squad number this year, did he? But he has made an appearance for us. But again, then you're relying on young lads. Once you start getting them injuries, you're relying on young lads. So you need someone who can get in there, play a bit of centre, play a bit of wing. So if you've got Ben Davies playing alongside him, you've still got a good unit there playing, rather than two young lads having to play next to each other and it looking a little bit raw.
Again, guessing. I suspect at this moment in time that we may well go into the season with the squad that we've got, and we won't just burn a hole in our pockets with the money available. And if there's nothing that is right for the squad right now, we'll just keep an eye on the market for when the NRL season starts or players fall out of favour, whatever they are. Because you usually find, at least a couple of times a year, players who you didn't expect to hit the market suddenly do. And if we're in a position to be able to snap them up because the money is available at the time, then do you hang on?
It's possibly that could possibly be the way. I don't think that's necessarily going to go down well with Saints fans, but it might just be the only option that we've got. That you don't just want to go out and sign anyone. You want to sign someone who's right for the club, who fits, isn't a problem player, but will bring quality to the club, and isn't just another player that you think, why have we signed him again?
It's like going to Smith's with one of your kids with £20 in the pocket and then wanting to spend it on the first thing they see in the shop before they've had a full look round.
Yeah, fair enough.
And having to persuade them, just hang on. Make sure it's right. Don't just spend it for the sake of spending it.
Yeah, fair enough. Good analogy.
Right. I think that's us done and dusted, Kev.
Soapbox off.
Soapbox off. But hopefully that has given a little bit of understanding and context to how the squad is and in terms of where we are in contracts. I think it's important to actually visualise it on a page sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's the right thing. Trying to give context, not trying to tell people that they're necessarily wrong, but just saying, well, if you want to do this, how are you going to do it? Think about how you're going to do it. You can't just say, we are going to get rid of a halfback now. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, somebody's got to want them and they've got to want to go.
Yep.
Right, that's us done. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and we'll be back next week for another episode of Redvee TV. Catch you soon.